You need to show a photograph? Eloise, I'm going to show you something through a camera. I want you to tell me if you can see it, okay? You can't really see me right now because the camera's pointing up, correct?
Correct.
Can you see a document that I'm showing you?
Yes.
Okay. That's the way, I mean. No, you really can't see it there, but you can. Thank you, Ron. And just for your planning purposes, we've canceled a couple of witnesses based upon some of the testimony, so at this point this will be my last witness, and we will go into the proffers of both experts. It's a little early, but that also compressed everything down, so we're probably going to be done tomorrow.
Okay, let's bring the jury in.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is the microphone I'm talking to this. This was to pick it up to.
She won't be able to see. Will she be able to hear the clerk to swear her in?
Yes, you can hear me now, Eloise, correct?
Yes.
Madam Clerk, would you just introduce yourself?
My name is Lisa.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
You just heard Lisa? Perfect.
Very bright, Ron.
Please be seated. Mr. O'Mara, call your next witness.
The defense would call Eloise Dilligard, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Dilligard, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. The clerk, Lisa, is going to swear you in. You'll be requested to raise your right hand. So I would ask that you do that. And if you would.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony presented will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am. And I first want to thank you. I understand that you're homesick and appreciate you spending some time with us today. I think I've asked you your name. Tell me your name again.
Eloise Dilligard.
Okay. And and if you would spell your last name.
D as in David, I-L-L-I, G as in Gary, A-R-D as in David.
Thank you, ma'am. And back in February of 2012, did you live at the retreat at Twin Lakes?
Yes.
How long had you lived there at the point of February 2012?
By that time it was about 2.5 years.
Okay. You have since moved out of that location, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to take you back to the time that you lived at the retreat at Twin Lakes and ask you if you knew somebody by the name of George Zimmerman.
I did.
And how long had you known him?
Ever since we moved in October of '09.
Would you consider yourselves friends?
He was my neighbor. We spoke on a friendly basis, had no problems with one another.
Okay. And were there times that you became aware that he was involved in a program called Neighborhood Watch?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever see him in the neighborhood patrolling or doing anything like that as part of Neighborhood Watch?
No.
But you did know him as a friend or a neighbor?
As a neighbor, a friendly neighbor.
Okay. And focus your attention now, if I might, on February 26th, which of course is the night that Trayvon Martin was shot. Do you remember that night?
I do.
What I'd like you to do, if you would, is to tell the jury what first brought your attention to the event that you eventually came out or came to find out was the shooting we're talking about.
I was coming from Walmart down Reinhardt to go to Oregon and make a left, and a policeman approached me from the rear. And of course I thought, well, I didn't do anything wrong, but then I only to find out he wanted to go around me, so I pulled over. And as I was coming up Oregon to go into my neighborhood, I noticed that the police was going into the neighborhood. So when I pulled in, I looked down from the mail station down to the left and saw that there was crime scene tape going up, and I didn't want to go directly down, so I came around the right-hand side where I live to go around the back way and asked a couple of guys that were standing outside, and they told me they didn't know what's going on, but there was another policeman coming. So I then proceeded to come back around and go back around by the mail station toward the crime scene area.
Okay, and do you recall what the weather was like during that time?
It was very rainy that night.
Okay. And at some point, as you got closer to what you call the crime scene, did you notice any vehicles that were familiar to you?
Yes.
And whose
I
vehicle?
did.
And what vehicles were they?
It was George's truck.
And could you describe that if you would?
I believe it's a gray Honda Ridgeline.
Okay. If you could, tell the jury as best you can where within this area you noticed the truck.
Because of the way our road is for Retreat View Circle, it was more like on the curb or nearing the curb down by where the crime scene was.
Okay, let me ask it this
Which
way.
I believe was on Retreat View Circle. I'm not really sure exactly.
Okay. Do you know the area that has come to be known as the T intersection, which is very close to where the incident itself occurred?
Yes.
And though you may not have known the names then, there's a woman who lives in the end unit right by that T intersection by the name of Jenna Lauer. Do you know her?
No, I don't.
Okay. If we were to, I would ask for you to accept as a premise that she was living in that first condo or townhome just at the intersection of the T intersection and the sidewalk. Would you know what I was talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And to fast forward a moment, this was an area where you had testified in deposition that you actually had some conversations with police. So I'm just trying to geographically locate. If we were to presume that Jenna Lauer's townhome was that first one in that row of houses, where was the truck parked in reference to that?
If she was in the first one, then the truck would have been parked looking toward the east. It would have been slightly south of where her condo would be.
So if you were to walk out her front door, would you be looking sort of right at the truck?
Well, not right at it, but you would have to look more to the right if you were walking out of her condo, if her condo is facing Retreat View Circle.
Okay, because that would then put the truck parked on the curb as you would walk out her front door. It would be parked to the curb on the right-hand side of that street?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you say Retreat View Circle. Is that the street that actually circles around, or is the perimeter of the complex itself?
It does.
Okay. Is Miss Lauer actually on a street that comes off of Retreat View Circle?
If I'm visualizing exactly where you're talking about, I believe her condo would be facing Retreat View Circle. Yes.
Okay. How would it be, the front door, if I walked straight out her front door, would I eventually walk right into the clubhouse area?
No, you would have to walk down the street to the west.
Okay. Let's talk then about wherever the truck was located. You saw it in reference to the crime scene. You saw it in that area?
Yes.
Okay. And we may come back to a map in a minute and see if we can show you a map of the area. But let's
Okay.
move to the point where you came up to the area where the crime scene was. Describe what you first saw.
There were quite a few people standing on the sidewalk. There were people who were closer down to where the yellow tape was. And I kind of looked around, to see if I saw George, because I saw his truck. And after I didn't see him, then I recognized the lady from one of the HOA meetings, and I asked her what happened. And she said, I believe she forgot.
Ma'am,
For just 1 second.
Ms. Delegard, when you hear one of us say an objection, that means the court has to inquire. So I just hold on to your testimony for 1 second. You didn't do anything wrong. Just want to check with the court.
Okay, what is the objection?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained as to what somebody else said.
Your Honor. Did you know the person's name who you spoke to?
I don't know her. All I know is she's from Pembroke Pines.
Okay. So you had a conversation with her about the events that she perceived?
I simply asked what was going on,
Okay.
and that was her reply to me.
Okay. And at some point then, did you speak to any law enforcement officers?
After I could not find, or after I didn't see George, I did attempt to talk to some of the other residents that was there. And after I felt like, well, okay, I'm not in harm's way, I was walking away and a policeman came up and said to me, "You don't want to talk to me." And I turned around and I said, "I don't know what I can tell you because I wasn't here when anything happened."
Okay. And then what did the law enforcement officer say to you?
He then replied, "Well, we're trying to find someone who may know the people involved in the shooting."
Okay. And did he have any further conversation with you or show you anything?
He just asked me would I mind staying up, and he was going to go and take a picture and bring it back to the group of us that were standing there to see if we could recognize either the victim and or the suspect.
Did that officer happen to identify himself to you by name that you can recall?
He did not, and I'm usually pretty receptive to look at a name badge, but, with everything going on, I don't remember.
Okay. So at some point then, did he show you a picture or two of people who were involved in this event?
He came back with what I believe was an iPhone, and I'm only saying that because I own one, with 2 pictures.
Okay.
And I, along with the others standing there...
Let me interrupt for a moment to ask you if you could identify either by name or by description the other people who were present during that time.
There was a young Caucasian man. I can't remember his name. It was either Jeremy or Jonathan.
Okay.
And then there was a couple there. They were married, but I did not get their names.
Okay. And were they then present when this picture or these pictures were shown?
They were.
Okay. Were you able to identify anybody in either of those 2 pictures?
Yes, I was.
And who was that?
That was George Zimmerman, my neighbor.
Okay. We have seen those pictures here quite a bit in the courtroom. I'm not going to show it to you directly right now unless I have to. But was that a picture where Mr. Zimmerman had a bloodied nose?
He did have a bloody nose, yes.
Okay. And there was describe the difference, if any, you saw between the picture that you saw that night and the George Zimmerman who you knew before that night.
His nose was very bloody, and to me, it looked very disfigured, like it was see I'm looking at him, so then it looked like it was somewhat to the left or right. But I know it was not the way I knew him. His face was the nose was very disfigured and a lot of blood coming from it.
Okay. Did it take you a minute or two, or how long did it take you to even figure out that that was the same person?
I mean, his face still looked the same. The only difference was the disfigurement and the blood in his nose.
Did you advise the law enforcement officer who was present of this person, George Zimmerman's name?
Yes, I said, that's my neighbor George.
Okay. And did anybody else, as you can best recall, identify the person as well?
Objection as to hearsay.
Sustained.
Don't answer that. After you identified George Zimmerman as the person in the picture, were you shown a second picture?
I was.
And that was somebody, was that anyone who you identified?
I did not know the person's name. I had seen him in passing probably earlier that day, but I mean, I didn't know who he was.
Okay. And do you know now that that person was Trayvon Martin?
Yes.
After then you identified George Zimmerman, what was the next thing that you did, or who'd you talk to about that event?
Are you talking about that night?
Yes, ma'am.
If I can remember correctly, I think the first concern was where his wife was, if his wife was there.
Okay, was that your concern, you mean?
Yes, because I mean, I knew he was married and I didn't see her, and they're my neighbors, and once I saw his face and what looked to be, then hurt, my first concern is, where's his next of kin, his wife?
Okay, and what'd you do about that?
Well, after, there was nothing else I could do at that point. Once I found out that, as I thought, I was no longer in harm's way because my husband was out of town, I went back down to my house, parked in my driveway, got out of the car, and went up to George's residence and knocked on the door to see if Shelley was there. I rang the doorbell, I knocked, I heard the dog, but nobody came to the door. Shortly thereafter, Shelley pulled up behind, perpendicular to the driveway. She didn't pull in because I was walking away. And she asked me,
Objection,
where is...
hearsay.
Your Honor, I would ask to be heard on that hearsay objection, if need be. It's not all for the truth of the matter of what Ms. Zimmerman may have said, but it just sets the...
Well, I don't want speaking responses. Please approach.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Delagarde, are you still there?
I'm here.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the patience. Well, I think we were talking about that you had a conversation with Shelley Zimmerman,
Yes, a brief conversation.
and after that, what did Ms. Zimmerman do?
He, once I concluded my conversation, she sped off around to the crime scene.
Okay. Now, I may have taken you out of time a little bit. I want to go back. When you were there with the police, well, let me ask you this. Did you go back to the area of the event at all that night?
Yes, I did go back down there to make sure she was okay.
Okay.
But I didn't see her, so I got back in my car and I went home.
Okay. My understanding was that you were present during, that you were questioned by law enforcement to the extent that you've told us about. Were you present during any other witnesses' discussions with law enforcement?
Yes, the young man that was there alone, and then the other couple spoke to the policeman in terms of what they knew.
Okay. I don't want you to tell us precisely what you heard them say, because law enforcement may have already testified to that, but were you there when those people gave their statements to law enforcement?
I was there when they gave their verbal statement, but I was there when they did their written statement.
Okay. I'm going to ask you if you could be a bit more precise. I know that you don't recall names. I believe you said one might have been Jeremy and another one Jonathan. Was that correct?
That's what I think I remember about the names, but again, I'm just not sure.
That's fine. But do you recall, were there three people? I think you said one female and two males, or were there any more than that who gave their verbal statements to law enforcement in your presence?
In my presence, there was a couple, a male and a female, and then there was a gentleman who was by himself.
Okay. Did you give any verbal, except for what we've talked about so far, did you give any verbal or written statements to the police that night?
No, other than he asked me my name, and I gave it to him, and I gave him my phone number.
Okay. And then, and now I think we'll go back to the time where you left the area of the event first, ran into Miss Zimmerman, went back looking for her, didn't find her, and left the second time?
Correct.
Okay. At some point then, did you give statements to law enforcement regarding what you knew or heard about the event?
Yes, there was an FBI agent who left a card on my door and requested I call him, so I called.
Okay.
And he and another agent came to my house and interviewed me.
And you gave them a statement about whatever information they asked you about, I presume?
That is correct.
Okay. At some point, did you have an opportunity to listen to what we call, and have been calling during this trial, the Lauer 911 tape? And for your purposes, that is the tape that has the this voices in the background screaming for help. Have you had an opportunity to listen to that?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell me the circumstances or the setting around the first time that you listened to it?
The first time that I heard it was when it was played on one of the local news channels.
Okay. Were you by yourself or with anyone else?
You know, I don't remember.
Okay. How many times have you listened to the tape?
Besides that time, well, it was played over and over, but I would probably say maybe 2 or 3 times.
Okay. Did you hear a voice screaming for help in the background that you were able to recognize or identify?
I heard the voice screaming in the background, and of the 2 that we are discussing, the deceased Trayvon and George, I've only heard George talk.
Okay. Whose voice do you believe that was in the background screaming for help?
Based on the fact that I've only heard George's voice and it's a light male voice, I would say that it was his,
And by his, you mean whom?
George Zimmerman.
And when you say you've heard him talk, tell us again about how long you've known him?
By that time, it was 2.5 years.
Okay. An opportunity to hear him both speak to you and speak to others in your presence?
That is correct.
Ever hear him yell at a dog or laugh at a joke or anything like that you can recall?
Never heard him yell at the dog. I mean, whatever commands he gave the dog were very, just like a voice talking to someone next to you. But again, from what I heard, he has a light male voice.
Okay. I'm going to ask you then, I'm going to try something that may work. I'm going to show you an exhibit. It states Exhibit 1, and just see if there's any chance that this can be done in a way where you can identify the picture. And then we'll have you try and walk us through a location where you may have seen George Zimmerman's truck, okay? So
Okay.
What you're seeing now should be blocked pretty soon by a picture. Can you see that picture?
I can see the picture.
Okay. Let's just see if this works in any form or fashion.
You need to bring it up a little. It's going out of my focus.
Okay. Let me try something else then.
That's better.
Okay. For you, maybe. Hold on 1 second.
Sure.
Does that work? Can you at least...
That works.
All right. I'm going to move it a little bit to an area. Okay. Can you describe what is barely on the screen at this point? Can you see that?
The only thing I can see is a blue line, a little bit of grass, and the white border on the picture.
Can you see the pool that's in the center of the photo?
I can.
No, it's not. What do you mean? Your Honor, if I might. It is. Okay. Unless we start talking about mirror images, Your Honor, that's not going to work, so I'll move on to another area of inquiry. Ms. Delegard, I'm going to try to do verbally what we were just going to do visually. And ask you this. You are familiar with the complex, correct?
I am.
Okay. You sort of gave us a walk or a drive-through as to how you entered into the complex. Can you tell me what entrance you came into that night?
I came in the entrance that is directly in front of Bentley Elementary School.
And is that the one that when you drive in, you have the clubhouse immediately in front of you and just to your right?
That is correct.
Okay. From that point, and I know we're testing your memory since you don't live there anymore, from that point, as you're coming in Oregon, I know that you took a sort of back route over to your complex because you took a right on Retreat View Circle, correct? When you first came in.
No, if you say the back route, then you're talking about the part of Oregon that goes up to 46A or Johnny H.E. Thomas.
Yeah, I confused it by saying that. My understanding... One moment, if I might, Your Honor. Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
That's okay.
All right.
I can hear you.
I think I confused my question a moment ago. My understanding was that when you first came into your subdivision, you realized that there was some crime scene tape, correct?
Correct.
As you're coming into the main entrance with the clubhouse off to your right, which way was the crime scene tape from where you were driving in?
To the left or to the east.
Okay. And that would have been, is that the normal way that you would go from that main entrance to your residence? You would go to the left?
No, I would go to the right.
Okay. All right. Now, what I would like to do is start at the Oregon main entrance with the clubhouse on your right. And if you can sort of walk or drive us to the area where you did drive up to get a better view of the area of the crime scene itself.
If I were to drive in to the entrance that was directly across from Altamese Bentley Elementary, I would have made a left rather than a right to go down to where the crime scene was.
Okay. And where on that scene then would you have seen George's truck?
Oh boy, it wasn't even 3/10 of a mile down because it's not that far.
Okay. Do you have a present memory today as to where the truck was?
It was parked on Retreat View Circle, just to the left of where you're talking about the T area was.
Okay. Let me ask it this way. I'm going to refresh your recollection with some testimony potentially. Could the truck have been parked not on Retreat View Circle but on the 2nd Street in, so that, you know the 2nd Street in I'm talking about? So if you don't take...
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, you don't take your first left onto Retreat View Circle, but you take your second left onto Twin Trees? Twin
Trees Lane, I believe it is.
Could that have been the street that you turned down and saw Mr. Zimmerman's truck?
It could have been. All I know is that it was on one of those curves.
Okay, that's okay. Nonetheless, wherever that truck was, it is your testimony that it was directly in front of, maybe a touch off to the right, of what we've identified as Miss Lauer's townhome?
Yes.
Okay. So if we were to use Miss Lauer's townhome as the focal point, you would walk out or look out her front door and look just to your right to see George Zimmerman's truck where it sat that night?
That is correct.
Okay. I might have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay.
I'll try and assist as best I can with the compromise of having it this way.
Okay, thank you. Cross?
Ms. Delegard, can you see me all right?
No,
She
Kind
can't
of,
see
sort
you.
of.
it's looking straight up. That's what she sees.
Okay. Can't see me still?
I can see you through the just beyond the little projector. Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Bernie Della Rionda with the State Attorney's Office.
Yes, I do remember
Okay,
you.
great. I just have a few questions and then we'll get you out of here. Okay, or
Sure.
we'll leave you alone, I should say. Since you're Yes, ma'am. The bottom line is that day you came into contact with a police officer who told you there was a suspect and a victim, showed you some photographs. You recognized one photograph as George Zimmerman. The other photograph, you didn't know the person. You now know it's Trayvon Martin, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you said you had seen him earlier the day in the retreat at Twin Lakes, correct? Just walking around?
Right.
Okay. And then finally, you were asked about the voice. You mentioned you saw it on TV, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't have a point of reference. All you knew was George Zimmerman's voice, but you had never heard Trayvon Martin's voice, correct?
That is correct. I've never heard his voice.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Any redirect?
A sick woman in her bed who came with us. I think we're done with her and do appreciate her coming.
Okay.
Ms. Delegard,
Yes.
we are done. I appreciate your time. Thanks very much for doing this from your home, and I apologize for the interruption. I hope you feel better.
It's okay. All
Thank you.
right.
May Ms. Dillagard be excused from
Yes.
being recalled?
Excused by the defense, yes.
Okay, you're excused. That means that you don't have to appear again. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, and when you're finished with that, if you'll approach for just one moment. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there's some more matters that we need to take care of tonight, and so I'm going to let you go home at this time. It's 4:21 before, as you're starting to get your notepads in order, I'm going to give you my admonitions. During the overnight recess, you're not to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. You're not to read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case. You're not to use any type of an electronic device to get on the internet to do any independent research about the case, people, places, things, or terminology. And you're not to read or create any emails, tweets, text messages, social networking pages about the case. Do I have your assurances that you will abide by these instructions? Okay, with that, put your notepads face down and follow Deputy Jarvis back into the jury room. And we'll have the jury back at 9 a.m. Please be seated. We're going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we're going to continue on with the animation issue and the proffering of the testimony of Mr. Connor. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, we will be back in court before the jury comes to discuss another issue regarding witness Mr. Donnelly. Court will be in recess for 10 minutes.